Welcome to Schema App Live. My name is Martha Van Berkel, and I am the CEO here at Schema App. And I'm delighted today to be joined by my esteemed colleague and my team lead for customer success, Jeffrey Burns. Welcome, Jeff.
Hey, happy to be here. Always fun.
So this is our second Schema App Live, and we are just super pumped to be able to share both Schema markup news, multi-type entities, and Q&A. But before we get started, you may notice we have a fancy new logo. And so just last week, we launched our new logo that really, I think, speaks to who we are as a company, both the fact that we sort of are semantic, connected Schema markup nerds. So you see sort of the connections in our new logo, but we're also about connecting with people. So we're very people-centric in all of our engagements. And then you also see that pointing upwards, we're all about sort of growth and innovation, but we have an open element there because we don't know what we'll connect to next, who we'll connect to next, and sort of how the technology will evolve. And so we're just really excited about our new brand. I was thinking I need to get like an orange sweater or something so I can kind of really sort of, show off my true orange, friendly, connected side. I always like to start by introducing myself using a knowledge graph. And this allows you to see sort of who I'm connected to sort of out in the world. I spent 14 years at Cisco, so I still have sort of a true heart in enterprise. I have a technical background where I studied mathematics and engineering and got the chance to attend MIT. I am one of the co-founders of Schema App. I am Canadian. And I have two beautiful children who I've spent way more time with over this past summer and who are finally back to school. And I used to own a beautiful Austin Healey Sprite, which actually starred in the movie Losing Chase that Kevin Bacon directed. And I share this because it allows you to infer that you will now win that Kevin Bacon game because you're 3 degrees from Kevin Bacon because you know me, but also because it explains the power of schema markup and that when you put it on your content and explain sort of the relationships between other things, that Google can infer and sort of connect people to those right things or the questions that they're answering. Jeff, do you want to just take a moment to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. So my name is Jeffrey Burns. At the top of my knowledge graph, there is importantly a Toronto Maple Leafs logo because I am a diehard Maple Leafs fan. I studied technical things at York University, like is time real, since I was a philosophy major, and I'm a member of the Schema App team, proudly. So I'm excited to get this discussion going.
All right, let's do it. The Schema App Live is brought to you by Schema App, and we are an enterprise solution that really not just focuses on the code of schema markup, but really how schema markup becomes a strategy within your business. Again, always focused on helping you drive results. And we really have the pleasure to work with some amazing companies around the world, helping them sort of leverage schema markup in order to really make an impression in search and stand out and drive those business results. I often don't talk about what we do, but I thought I'd just illustrate some of the problems that we solve. And sort of as we go through the webinar, we'll talk specifically about some strategies around, implementing some advanced schema markup. But if you're trying to do schema markup at scale, sort of with minimum resources and little engagement from IT, that's really where we can help. And so, the challenges of creating it at scale, monitoring and reporting on what that value is, or also kind of deploying it in an easy way, that's really what we do at Schema App. And I thought I'd just take a moment to show you our Schema App highlighter tool, just a visual about how we can really set up a template and deploy it across many different pages and sort of dynamically update it as it goes on. And again, I often share all my expertise, but I don't actually share what I'm most proud of, this company that we founded that really helps these amazing brands do this at scale. And so this is just a picture of, how you can highlight elements within the page, but not just to do basic schema markup, but to do the advanced, really nerdy schema markup like what we're talking about. So if you want to do schema markup right, connected, at scale, using any of the schema.org vocabulary, and are a tiny team and just don't have unlimited resources to dev, give us a call because we are seeing amazing results with the work that we're doing. And part of that comes because of our customer success team. And our customers have told us that the customer experience of what we do is really what makes us unique. And so, Jeff, can you just talk a little bit about what the customer success team does, and then we'll jump into our agenda.
Absolutely. So more and more people are becoming aware of schema markup, structured data, and some of the, like you said, amazing results. it can have for your website. So the customer success team at Schema App is really just all about helping our customers achieve their desired outcome. So that's what they're hoping to achieve through structured data. And that help ranges from like full managed service to email support. And it helps with things like defining your strategy, overcoming technical issues, ensuring coverage, measuring an impact, or once you're all set up, how can you gain some business insights from your markup and your website?
Awesome. So speaking of our customer success team, I am honored to have them joining us on the Q&A. So if you have questions, which is what we're going to dedicate the whole second half of this webinar to, Taylor Lepore and Anna Petkovic, who are part of our customer success team, are experts in Schema App and in Schema Markup, are there waiting to answer your questions starting right now. So if you have questions, you'll see there is a Q&A section on the Zoom webinar. You can click on that, put your question in, and then they will endeavor to answer it, or they'll mark it for us to answer live when we get later in the program. So welcome, Taylor and Anna. Thanks for joining us. And feel free to ask us questions. We are here and want to share our knowledge about schema markup and how we sort of help you make it a success. So today's agenda, I always love talking about what's new and changing. Back in 2015 when we started, there wasn't a whole lot changing and excitement, but these days, every month there's Google's making changes, as well as there's sort of new discoveries of what we're seeing schema markup impact. So we'll jump into a bit of news, and then we'll dig into multi-type entities. So this is an advanced strategy, but we'll kind of break it down for you, sort of help you assess of where it makes sense to use, how you use it as a superpower within your schema markup, and then we'll move into Q&A. All right, let's jump in. What's new? So schema.org, the vocabulary for schema, just had its 10th release. And this is the 9th release in schema.org in 2020. And this is significant because we're seeing a release every other month, which we've never seen before. We would often see them quarterly, so there'd be 4 a year. But the fact that we're at the 9th release and it's only September, I think is great evidence for sort of continued investment in the foundation of the vocabulary. And it's primarily chaired by Dan Berkel at Google. And so we're seeing sort of some small changes in this release. I'll say, I'm excited as a skier that ski resort is now added as a subclass, so we can get, Whistler, Blackcomb, and all those great ski resorts. So we're being really specific about who they are. But we're seeing a lot of things added to pending, and pending is really where they're still defining and finalizing the elements within that schema.org class. And we're seeing a lot of investment in sort of, I'll say, planning around education and learning resources. And I think this is very timely, just with what's going on around COVID around the world and so much education and learning resources going online, that this makes sense that we're going to see continued investment within the vocabulary in that area. We also start seeing some changes to rich results. So home activities also, I think, very relevant these days, as especially those of us that had children at home over the last 6 months or are sort of back there, sort of as we hit sort of a second wave. And so now when people search for home activities, there's a specific rich result. And you can see that specifically here, sort of home fitness and well-being, videos showing up. And if you click on this, it actually then goes to a detailed page where you can see more information or a video on that. Image licensing has also moved out of beta. Now you can see image licensing over here. There's like this little tag on here that says licensable. What I find about this one is interesting, both from a kind of helping share what's licensed or sort of permission to Google and to web users as to how they can use that image. But I also find this an interesting direction generally around schema markup, sort of giving people permission to use your information. And so if you think about privacy and reuse of information being sort of a key thing that people are concerned about, now they're doing this for images, how might this play also on our company information and otherwise? So license is actually just another property within schema markup. And so it's like they planned for this right from the beginning. And then finally, there's been some evolution on article requirements for AMP and non-AMP pages. And specifically, non-AMP pages now only have recommended properties. So just, I'll say, continued evolution specifically around that article rich result. Jeff, anything you want to add on here?
I think that's a good coverage of what's new to rich results.
All right, let's talk a little bit about FAQ-rich results. If you joined us for our last Schema app live, you would have seen some of our research around sort of how we were seeing trending around FAQs change by industry. And so we've continued to dig into this specifically for our clients and sort of understanding, what has changed. While we've been doing this also over the last month, John Mueller has called out that, there is a change in how Google is showing and how often they're showing FAQ. And he really called it like the natural development, right? So a natural evolution of them being perhaps showing FAQ, not for everybody who has the schema markup there, but where it's sort of most appropriate and sort of adding value to those searchers and that searcher's intent. We did do some research to see sort of if the type of FAQ impacted it. So whether it was nested or whether it was just an FAQ page, and we didn't see any correlation there. And we are seeing recovery sort of across the different industries, but over the last 2 months, we did see health and e-commerce sort of have the biggest impact where we were previously seeing FAQ results. We do have a webinar that we did specifically on FAQ, so it still is a great strategy to use across many different types of your content. And so stand out and search with FAQ schema markup is what you can search in order to find additional resources on sort of advanced strategies around FAQ. I was also excited to see Marie Haynes, I get her search news you can use, highly recommend signing up for that news feed. And she shared this post from Brodie Clark out of Australia, who is starting to see Google do some testing in featured snippets using how-to schema markup. This was on mobile. You can see sort of it has like the different steps. And, it's really, really interesting that, featured snippets is one of those areas that, is perhaps a little bit vague on how they come up, but this is something that we've seen, them starting to test. Jeff, I know like you've talked to your customers a lot about featured snippets in the past. Kind of any sort of takeaways or sort of just guidance around how schema markup impacts them?
Okay, so at the bottom of a featured snippet, there's a learn about this, and the documentation says that they're not affected by structured data, but we know, thanks to Bill Slosky, that there was a patent application for the featured snippet, and in that, it mentioned structured data. So it's a part of this for sure. Google's just very quiet about exactly what role structured data plays in a featured snippet. Everyone's excited about feature snippets. It's a wonderful result. It should be a part of your SEO strategy. But it's new to see structured data or rich results specifically as part of a featured snippet, and I'm going to be eager to see more of this in the future.
Yep, so thanks Brodie, thanks Marie. We'll continue to keep our eye on this one. We also all know that structured data testing tool is going away, and Jasmine on our customer success team just wrote an article around saying goodbye to Google structured data testing tool and hello to alternatives. And so the rich result test, Jeff, maybe you can just talk briefly about it and how our team's sort of trying to evolve to use it as our primary tool.
Right. Okay. So just a general recommendation. I would recommend the Schema App Analyzer for a site-wide assessment. That's going to give you a good health check of your schema markup. I would use the rich results test for a single page assessment from the perspective of achieving a rich result. It's the rich results test. And Write Structured Data Helper, it's a Chrome extension for a single page assessment. That's a good tool to use as well. So there's a couple of different options you have depending on what your need is or what you're validating.
Yeah, I love that the market's like responding on different things. Again, we'll be sort of looking at that like holistic health in order to sort of help you get that done. And our analyzer is available for all of our different subscriptions. So whether it be one site or a large enterprise site, it's available across the board. So that article is great. We'll go into all the details about the pros and cons. Thank you, Jasmine. Again, if you, actually, I think we're getting the featured snippet for the right SD helper too. But if you want to look for it on our blog, schemaapp.com. All right, for the part that
Really gonna
everyone's been
miss
waiting
that though.
for. Yeah, we're all going to miss structured data testing tool. It's,
Yeah.
I still use it. Don't tell anyone, but I just love how it shows the different entities, right?
On the right-hand side, it's just a really pretty version view of the JSON.
Yeah, exactly. All right, now the type everyone's been waiting for, your monthly dose of advanced schema markup education. Multi-type entities. So Jeff, I'm going to hand it over to you. I love what is an entity. It plays to your philosophy background. Walk us through sort of the basics here, and then let's go through some examples together.
Okay, so I think the simplest way to think about what an entity is just change the word. So entity can be used interchangeably with thing. So if it's a thing, it should be an entity or a class or a type in the schema.org vocabulary. And it defines hundreds of entities, and they all have properties that further define them. So personally, I think of the entity or schema class as the big bucket, and then the definitions, further define those things. They can refer to a physical thing, so your house, physical thing, it's an entity, or a more abstract concept like a day of the week. You can't hold a day of a week in your hand, but it's definitely a thing. And search engines have granted some of these types to be eligible for a rich result, which is what we're all eager to achieve.
All right. So multi-type entity, that then means that it's something that's two things?
No. Multi-type entity, it isn't two things at once. It's one thing that's best explained by having two types. So there's kind of a difference there. So there's going to be times where you'll have, say, for example, a house, and you'll want to describe something that's important about that thing or your house, but the laundry list of properties won't let you describe those important properties. So you might look at making it a multi-type entity. So yeah, we have a few quick examples for us to consider. The first one is your house is for sale. So that would be, say, a single family residence, but it's also a product because people can buy it. It'll have an offer or a price tag. Then similar, a room for rent isn't a single family residence, it's a hotel room. But again, there's some relevant details to this thing that's worth calling out, like how much it costs to rent the room for the night, or what amenities you can have in your room. And then maybe more uh, harder to understand is haircuts as a service plus product. So I think Martha will dig into that later. Comedy event on air, so that's a broadcast event, but it's also a comedy event. It's not a news program. So you can see how these things are best served as being defined with two schema classes rather than one. So why do you want to do this? Like I said earlier, you want to fully describe the entity on the page. It's not best served with the one schema class or entity. It's best served as being described as two. Usually, probably the second bullet point here is the most common reason you would go shopping for another schema class to use. And that's because that other schema class may have properties that you find useful to use. Number three is borrowing from an entity that's eligible for a rich result. So, you can do that, but you still have to be honest. You can't be completely disingenuous, and I'm pretty sure Google would ding you for doing that.
Great. So this is a really about sort of fully describing the page and having properties perhaps from two different types that will then allow you to fully describe it. And ideally also perhaps get a rich result so that you can get more clicks and impressions from getting that. But again, that it's still honest with regards to how you're describing it. And I think this is kind of best explained sort of when you think about like a house for sale was, I think, one of the first schemas I did like back in 2013 or 2014 for a real estate firm. But this one, like, it's a house for sale, but it, like, you need to have a price on it, right? So like you still need to make sure that that's there. So Jeff, I like always showing examples of the schema markup. You and the team have sort of done a good job. Can you just like walk us through sort of how this eventually shows up? Again, in Schema app, it's easy because you just add another type and then boom, tick a bing, you have like access to all those properties. But in the schema markup, like, what does that look like?
Absolutely. So you do want to, if you're going to have a multi-type entity, you need something that makes sense because you're claiming to this thing is both of these entities. And if it's not, you may end up like relevant for searches that aren't relevant for your funnel. So, it could hurt you if you do it wrong. Here in our example is the house for sale. So you can see at the top under the at type property, we have product and single family residence. Then down below, you can see that product has the offers property. So that's where we can say things like, valid until, this house is available, its asking price, and so on. And then the single family residence has the information like number of bedrooms or bathrooms or half baths and so on, or amenity features. So that's how pulling from the property pool for both classes is an effective way to describe something that needs more than one entity.
Okay, so this like reminds me of like the nesting conversation we've had previously, Jeff, where,
Right.
often people, like if you're using the structured data testing tool, you'd see like two separate entities, right? Like it would have single family residence and a second kind of product, which is incorrect, right? Like the thing is both. It's not two separate things. Merging them is advanced, but is the right thing to do.
Right. And so if you're nesting, they're two separate things, and how it's nested explains the relationship. This is totally different. It's saying there isn't two things with a relationship. It's one thing that are both of these entities.
One of these things is not like the other. Okay, let's talk about hotel room. I think this is another one. Again, we know that, during COVID, like this is an industry that's been hugely hit, but I think this is a great one that kind of talks about, how you can use all the different amenities like within a hotel room, within a hotel where we would nest, but then also again has an offer that we'd want to call out or perhaps ratings, for those types of rooms. Can you walk us through this one?
Absolutely. So again, if you look at the top of this JSON block, you can see at type lists hotel room and product. So it's not nested, it's two entities for the same item. Now, hotel room has the pertinent information like is smoking allowed, maximum attendee capacity. You could list amenity features. There's a whole bunch of properties available to the hotel room schema class that you would want to use depending on your hotel room. And then product allows us to pull in the offer details. So it's not just a hotel room. This is a business transaction. You can rent or purchase this hotel room for a time, and that's where you can describe the price.
Love it. So haircut. Let's walk through the basics here, and then let's have a debate and talk a little about service and product. And actually, a fun conversation I'll share that we've had here at Schema App over the last week. So Jeff, let's walk through this one, and then let's talk a little bit about how product has changed.
Okay, so this is a service plus product. Third example. So if you look at the top, product and service all both nested under the at type property. Service, you can call it the provider of the service. And that makes all kinds of sense because if you're purchasing a service, it's from someone or an organization. And then product, again, will let us have the offer details. So the price, the currency, the availability, and so on.
And the rich result. So
Right,
I have previously been wrong. I'm going to just admit it, Jeff. I was always a big proponent to say, like you should use service and not product for services. And
right.
I'm probably on tape like saying that over and over and over again. And so we were having that debate internally, and the team's like, but look at the description of product. I'll say now, any offered product or service. What? This has totally been updated.
Yep.
In the past, service was not sort of defined here. And by the way, service is not a subclass of product, just in case everyone's wondering. So service, is describing a service within schema.org, which I do still think is the most specific way to describe a service. And Jeff, to your earlier point, has properties specific to that, like provider, right? Area served and things that like really pertain specifically to that service. However, they've updated the description of product within schema.org. So Martha stands corrected. And so, well, previously I would never recommend doing a multi-type entity with product and service. Now I do. So, this is where sort of that, schema markup isn't a one-time thing. It does evolve both the vocabulary as well as the rich results, and is something that we should revisit. It's also something where you have to continue to learn. So, Martha, I consider myself an expert, Jeff, like you, but, we learned something new this week. And so like now I can, confidently say, yes, like do it as a service and product because both of those make sense based on the description. A service is more specific and I think is, we always want to use the most specific type within schema.org. However, product gets the rich result. And so here's a great way for you to get a rich result for a service. Should you sort of meet that criteria around like having aggregate rating or price?
Right. And so the description, like you said, it has the description
A
of product
haircut.
here. Yeah, a haircut's a great example. So service is there. I wouldn't just rely on product though if it's a service. It's still totally, like you said, worth multi-typing because, more accurately, a haircut is a service. You don't, you can't put a haircut in your hands and bring it home. So product feels awkward as like a class to use to describe a haircut. And it also has some properties that product doesn't. So yeah, totally worthwhile doing the multi-type entity for your service. Don't just call your service a product.
Now, did I mention that Schema app's the only tool out there that allows you to do multi-type entities for both a single page or at scale? So if this is something that really resonates with you, if you work in real estate, hospitality, service organizations, and want to be able to do this and get expert support as you do it, Schema app is the answer.
This
Um,
might be important to anyone who's doing SEO for local businesses that offer services like HVAC
Absolutely.
or others.
Lawyers, that's always a fun one. So we always love teaching both the community and our customers and help them learn about Schema App. It's why we do Schema App Live. It's core to our values as a company. And so we always like to share resources. We'll continue to sort of update also resources that we have. So one is that one I mentioned around, what are some alternatives to the structured data testing tool and what are the pros and cons? And it goes into quite a lot of detail, building out sort of that table that I showed previously. Our schema paths tutorial, if you are still trying to get the basics of sort of doing connected schema markup, that's a great resource.
Even not just the basics, I still use that, and I'm in our tools every single day. It's a great tool.
How to build a schema markup strategy if you're just getting started or want to sort of think holistically, especially if you're an agency and kind of want to work to explain, why schema markup's core to your business. And then also standing out in search with FAQ schema markup, which I mentioned previously. And then finally, I'll just mention our schema app newsletter. Again, we love sharing information about what's going on in the world and, these type of webinars, or I'm actually speaking a lot over the next couple months at like SEMrush, PubCon, others. So if you want to know sort of where you can learn more, this is our homepage, bottom of our homepage, you'll see sign up for the schema app newsletter. Go ahead and click on that and you will get all that robust information. We sort of have a policy that we just like send stuff that's of value. We don't necessarily just send empty kind of non-value emails. It's sort of not our place. And then also, if you're an agency and looking to sort of use this as a strategic way, we are, really see agencies as core to our strategy. And so check out our partners page at the top here and you'll find out more about our programs there. Look at that, 11:27. We are like right on time to shift gears and go into Q&A. So let me stop sharing here so that I can better see all the awesome questions that we have here. All right, here's a good one. Relevant to the content by Sharon. Thanks for asking it. Is there a limit on the number of types of entities that can be combined?
To my knowledge, technically, no.
But is it really
Uh,
practical, Jeff?
no, exactly. So like technically, no, practically, yes. Like you should probably find a multi-type combination that will accurately describe what it is you're creating markup for with, a pairing or maybe three at most if you really need it. That it's
Yeah.
rare that that's the case though.
Yeah, usually like two, I think is it's sort of
Yeah.
like one of those things where, you don't want to make it confusing then, right? Like I think often just one other one sort of just helps further clarify it, it's like the examples that we had. Next one here is from Maureen asking, would service and local business be a multi-type? That's a good one.
Yeah, I can take that question. So would service and local business be a multi-type? I actually don't think that that is a natural combination, only because a local business would offer a service. So that's a case where you would want your service type to be nested under your local business. But kind of like I said before, you might want to multi-type your service and product and then nest that entity under your local business where it fits.
Yeah, they're sort of different, right? Like a local
Right.
business provides that service. The local business isn't the service. And so this is again where you think about, what are things people purchase from you versus like who is providing that, or sort of who is the entity. And our how to do a schema markup strategy kind of asks some of those questions around sort of like, what questions do people have? Like what are people trying to engage with you on, that help you sort of delineate those two different ones. All right, here we are. Google has come up with rich results. Santosh, thanks for your question. Google has come up with rich results. How does Schema App adapt to continue updates from Google? And how does Schema App support complex nested schema markup relationships like double type entities? All right, so I'll take the first one, and then Jeff, maybe we can give some examples of how we use it sort of in the wild.
Okay.
So Schema App publishes, it basically pulls like the latest schema.org releases about 24 to 48 hours right after the release. So one of the things that we do is we make sure that we always have the updated latest vocabulary, and that includes pending, right? So, we really have the comprehensive application that has all the different properties and, all the different options and extensions within schema.org. And the intent here is, we really are the platform of choice for people who want to really learn how to use schema.org, in its full capacity. How do we sort of stay up with Google's changes? Well, because we have all the properties and things, really it's just a matter of us making sure we understand those business rules if we're doing like our health analyzer. And because Google now also updates us on changes through that Google Updates site, that's super helpful. But also, again, like we're looking at this every day, all day. So it's not something that like we do, in our spare time or in like a tenth of our week or our month. It's something that like Jeff and Taylor, Anna, and like our whole team is looking at on a day-to-day basis. So that really helps. Jeff, do you want to use in the tools like how we do complex nested schema markup or multi-type entities?
Yeah. So the schema app editor kind of just does this for you. So like a lot of the complexity is taken out just by the workflow of the schema app editor. You'll create a data item, which is a physical manifestation of an entity, and link it to a property. And so, I mean, I can interpret this question a couple of ways. Like, there's no limit to the amount of multi-type entities you can create. There's no limit to the number of individual entities that can be associated to a single property. And if you're talking about how many like nests down can this go, we like to start truncating it at around the second like hop away from the primary entity, only because at that point it's probably not as relevant to the page anymore, and we resolve the truncating by using @IDs to point to where that content would exist on your website. So everything's still tied together, but that way you can avoid like an infinite loop. If you have a product that's tied to a company that offers the product again and it keeps repeating, you can cut it off. Hopefully that answered your question, Santosh.
I'm also sharing my screen. Can you see this? So here, like you can see
Hmm.
how you would just like add the different kind of classes here. Like this is in the highlighter. So if you were doing, let's say, a
Right.
page with a ton of services and products, we add that right at the beginning. Just like, if you were defining it within the editor, it would go ahead and ask you for those two things as well. So it's sort of like built into how we do things. And again, if you want to learn more, feel free to contact us on our homepage, or if you go to our pricing page, we can talk to you on Drift. All right, let's keep going. Can you please contrast nesting and multi-entities again? All right. Do you want me to share like our example again, Jeff? Like
Yeah,
that might
I
be a
think,
way of
right.
sort of
I,
kind of going into some more detail there. So
I think so.
let's do that.
So while you bring that up, the nesting implies a relationship between two things. And then a multi-type entity is just one thing with no relationships yet. They could be possible, but we're not talking about that. And it just has two schema classes defining it by itself. So that's the relationship. If we're looking at this example, offers and then the @type offer, that is nesting. The offer class is nested, or the offer type is nested through that offers property. And then at the top, the @type has a hotel room and product multi-type entity. So those two are defined for that single property. So that's
And
the
so
difference.
yeah, and so think of it like when we do multi-type entity, we're just like allowing all this list of properties that's in schema.org. All of that's just like both are kind of mushed together and allow you to access them all. And so you're really sort of just saying like, this is both types, and then I want to access all these different properties to explain it. And then, just like all these properties here, like these would have nested elements to it. Good questions. We got people's brains going. I love it. All right. Here we are. Is it possible to mark up too much?
Personally, I don't think so. It's around how much you want to invest in your structured data. The way I explain it to our customers is prioritize your customer client workflow through your website or your funnel. So what pages are important to you from an SEO perspective, and that's your hit list for structured data. You might not want to mark up your terms and conditions pages, for example, but your products pages definitely do it.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I always think of like if it's relevant too, right? Like there's, Jeff, you have a great line when you sort of onboard our new customers. It's like, don't take it as a challenge to use every single property, but think about it as, like the ones that are relevant to the content of the page. However, if you're looking at the list of properties and there is something that you want to describe, it may also, think about, hey, I want to include this, right? Like you can go and then edit your content to include that element so that you can mark it up with the schema. Okay, so Ivan, I like your question here. Having service and product type inside the same schema is not confusing. Why not having two schemas on the same page? So this is sort of what we talked about around, the fact that the service is the product, right? So
Right.
it's not, there's not two things, like you're not selling a service and then you're having a second thing that you're selling that's a product. The service is the product. And so it's sort of that conversation in your own head that you need to figure out, right? So are you selling two things in which it is a service that you're offering and a product? Or are they indeed the same thing? And so, Schema App's a great example, right? So we're a software as a service. We are a service and a product, right? So we sell our software as a service and, it is also a product. So it's one of those things where you have to ask the question of, are they two things or are they one thing? And it isn't confusing. Like Google's supported multi-type entities for a very long time. And in fact, like in the hotel space, like they've had undocumented rich results for, since 2014. It's just, something that again is sort of not one of their, they're still looking at those common rich results. And then again, this is an advanced technique that you can use, again, to promote both understanding, which Google has been more vocal about as being like part of the intent of why they want to do structured data, and also to deliver sort of information that's going to engage those searchers.
And actually, in the structured data guidelines, Google um, sort of guides you against having the like conflicting top level entities, where if you had two schema entities, one service, one product, that would actually provide the confusion, like you said, Martha. The only time we're having multiple top level things is when they're the same type in a list on a page.
Exactly. Speaking of lists on page, we have a question about lists. So from Andre, hey Andre, how are you doing? What would be an appropriate way to list out news article summaries drawn from a list of external articles? Give Jeff a chance to think this through. So a list of news article summaries drawn out from a list of external articles.
Okay. This is an example where I might want to see the page to know exactly what schema class to use, because I'm thinking you might be reviewing these articles from other resources. And so like review as a class might actually be appropriate. And then you can say the review is about a news article, and the URL for the news article would be wherever that other page is. Um, and then it would just be this list of reviews. You could either collect them all in an item list or have all the review types be the top level entities. So if that's what's happening, then I would recommend that strategy. The only caveat I'll give you is that when you have many different types that are eligible for a rich result, and you're not filling out all the required recommended properties, you're going to get a bunch of errors and warnings in your enhancement report or when you run it through the rich results test or the structured data testing tool, which is now gone. So be aware you'll see a bunch of red and orange if you do it that way.
Yeah, and this is one again where, using I was thinking ad IDs or URIs, like to define where that article actually resides, is also a really important strategy as you do that. And Andre, you know us, so feel free to reach out if we can be of help there. All right, I love this one. Let's kind of switch gears and talk a little bit about return on investment and sort of benefits. Specifically, how do we measure the success of implementing Schema? Now, Jeff, you mentioned at the beginning when you're talking about customer success as desired outcomes. So maybe you can talk a little bit about like how desired outcomes change from customer to customer, and then sort of how do we measure it?
Right. Okay. So, how do desired outcomes change from customer to customer? I mean, they change based on the goals of the organization, right? So,
Exactly.
yeah, you could be you could be part of a content team that's just looking to deliver stickier content. So more time on page, more pages per session, that type of thing, which leads me to talking about the uh, measurement. And so you would use some of your same normal SEO metrics like impressions, clicks, time on page, all of those that I'm sure most of us are familiar, or if not all of us are familiar with. Um, but the goals can be also like just more revenue. Some people actually want schema just so they have all their information structured and they can query it. So it really changes. That's part of the big job of customer success at Schema app is to really dig into like how are you going to get a return on implementing schema markup across your site and make sure that we can have the right strategy and right tools to measure that. Um, yeah, good question.
Yeah, it comes down to the business, right? And what we're trying to drive as a business result. And I think the other piece is sort of like what areas of the business like you're trying to drive changes with, because especially if you're open to conversations about content strategy, there can be ways that we also make recommendations to move the needle, whether that be sort of more impressions, more clicks. One of our customers is like looking for brand awareness, right? And they're
Mhm.
measuring that very differently from like a conversion rate from an e-commerce site. So again, it depends, but start with what you're measuring right now in the digital team. How is digital successful? And then things that we, clicks, impressions, and then whatever that type of conversion is key.
Schema app is totally focused on being able to measure the impact of your markup. We have a couple of features in beta that are going to really help with that.
I
Um,
know our schema performance analytics, like boom,
yeah.
right? Yeah. So actually we're, Jeff, good point. Like, so we're actually like developing or have developed sort of our own reporting tools to look at schema performance and, get to sort of insight on sort of what impact that had on the business. And so that's in beta currently for our premium and enterprise customers, and super excited to continue to evolve that again, sort of as we do full service schema markup from strategy through implementation, measurement, and then strategy again. So maybe in our, maybe we'll do a whole session on how to measure the impact, and we can show a little bit of our search performance analytics for schema markup. Um, Shay has asked an interesting one. Does adding a large amount of JSON LD code affect your page speed? And my answer to this one's going to be, it depends, right? So if you're a schema app and you do this all the time and you have, optimized JavaScript in order to do that, the answer is it's minimal. But, it also depends on like if you're implementing it directly in a tag and you're not doing optimized JavaScript. We know Google has been, like I'll say, vague and not supportive of sort of dynamic JavaScript. There was a lot of debate for a good 3 years on sort of should you use a tag manager to do schema markup. They've since this past year now sort of said, yes, we support dynamic JavaScript in schema markup. But again, like it really depends on making sure that you know how to write it properly and that you optimize that JavaScript so it doesn't have an effect on the page. Jeff, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think that's really good coverage. Yeah, getting your JavaScript to execute quick enough is kind of the trick to dynamically injecting JSON LD.
All right. Next one on here. Oh yeah, this one's great, Lillian. Great to see you and hear from you. At what point would you consider a service only a service?
I'm thinking. It's a good
I know.
question. I
It's one where like if you had asked me this question 30 days ago, I was like, a service is always a service. Like, why would you ever put anything else? Like you can put an offer and other things with it. However, now that I've read that updated description under product, I would probably always do both now.
all right. I think I have the answer.
All right, go Jeff.
My answer is if there's no price at all. If there's no price at all, then it's going to be hard for you to take advantage. No price and no ratings. If you don't have a price and you don't have users rating your service, then there's no advantage of multi-typing to product because you won't get a rich result.
Like a community service might be a
Yeah,
good one, or a church service, right? Like where there's like no price, like everyone's welcome, or, you know, garbage service, like maybe if it's like done by the municipality or the community. Those would be maybe some examples.
yeah. Otherwise, be greedy and go for the rich result.
Super generous lawyers who don't charge. That doesn't happen. All right, here we are. Oh, man, we've gotten some great questions on our service. We knew that one was going to be a fun one. Okay, here we are. Dun, 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 dun. Let's do one more on product and service. Hi, Vanessa. How are you? Would you recommend using products and services as multi-type entities if there is no set price or price range? Jeff's answer,
There
just
you
use
go.
service. All right, done.
If it's difficult, think about doing like a starting from price. Because get a number in there. Throw your lowest number and have a qualifier. At least that'll help you
Yeah.
get the rich result.
Do we offer consulting services? So we offer support for all of our customers. So if you're using our Pro just on one site, sort of using our editor, you get an onboarding call with a Jeff or a Taylor or an Anna so they can answer all your questions. Basically like a free 30-minute consulting hour. Like sign up, free trial, like no commitment needed, but you get access to those great consulting services. And then we do set up in strategy for premium and enterprise. And then we have great agencies that we can refer you to if you're looking for sort of more tactical using our editor and pro account. If you are an agency, it's a different answer. So give us a call since we're all about sort of enabling our agencies to use our tools. All right, next question we have from Leanne is, do we have any updates on our highlighter extension? So we do. So our highlighter right now is in a web browser, and we actually have an internal tool that has a Chrome extension that allows us to do some work internally that we're just testing out, and our Chrome extension will be out really soon. The good news is like our internal tool we've just built allows us, we've no restrictions on the sites that we can use and make it work with, but we are excited about getting our highlighter Chrome extension so that especially our partners can use it more easily sort of across any site without having to get into XPath. So it's coming. We're all about enabling people to do their schema markup. And in the meantime, our customer success team can help you get that done. Next one here. Oh, question about lawyers. Gotta love those lawyer questions. All right, Keith, here we go. I have lawyers who do schema for two. I did hear Martha say lawyers can have both product and services in schema. Yes. Do they? But they
Yes,
don't share a price, right? So maybe if they have their ratings, like it's my
ratings.
question is like, what would be the value, right? If they're not going to show price, they could show a price range, perhaps. Like if they have packages, I was thinking like people who do wills or things that are perhaps like they have a set price or a price range. They could maybe use aggregate offer. Jeff, would that work?
Yes. Yep. There's
Okay.
aggregate offer as part of product.
This kind of comes down to like, are you showing a price or a rating, and are you going to get benefit from using that product piece? Okay. All right, let's keep going. This is so fun. Okay. Oh yeah, here we are. Same as question, Jeff. Okay, got your brain there? I think it's Xavier or X Morales. So for a community of organizations whose service is providing information on various topics through various websites they manage, would we mark up the main organization website with same as for each of the other websites? Do you want me to read it again?
No, I think I got it.
Okay.
Likely, yes. If it's really branded as this, if it is the same brand, then yeah, totally. But the thing where you say there's multiple websites makes me think maybe they're different brand extensions, and in which case I would have whatever the topmost part of this organization is, that is your primary entity, and you can use the sub-organization property to nest whatever that new brand or organization is. Then the inverse property of that from your more niche location to the parent is parent organization. And yeah, you can, if they're all part of the same, then yes, use same as, or if there's an implied hierarchy, that's the word I was forgetting, hierarchy, then yeah, use the sub and parent organization properties.
Yeah, or brand can relate to back to
or
the
brand.
organization. So if it's like like one organization, but it has a different brand, that might be another way of doing it. Often with these, it's a question of like, how do you want Google to understand those relationships, and is that important? And then sort of defining that strategy.
Yeah, same as was really important a while ago when Google was relying on same as to understand your footprint, your organization's footprint. So like we're Schema app and we have a Facebook and a YouTube and a Twitter. So like where are those web properties and make sure they're ours. And also for referencing external vocabularies like Wikidata. So that's where same as is like really shines. But yeah, if you have multiple websites for the same org, that's exactly what you should do.
All right, here we go. Is there any issue with repeating an FAQ on multiple product pages where they are all relevant?
In the documentation, it tells you that if you're repeating an FAQ where the content is pretty much exactly the same, mark it up one time. Don't duplicate the exact same text and markup everywhere. So that's more a cue to your content team to be creative wherever you're applying FAQ. So you
Maybe
can mark it
name
up.
name the product dynamically, right? Like within the
Right.
FAQ,
There you
or
go.
sort of have some type of relevance there.
We're
Great.
giving all the tricks away.
Not all of them. The next one I think is interesting. So Mandy, thanks for this question. What should we do when schema requires a property that is not on the page and we don't want to add it, such as a job requiring a salary, like we don't want to put the salary on the page. So this is one, like we post our jobs and we don't include salary. And we do that from a business decision, right? Like I want to have that conversation with my candidates sort of when they apply. By the way, we're hiring a full stack developer and also an account manager right now. So if those are of interest and you want to join the Schema app team, go to our careers page, check it out, relay it to a friend. Um, so this is one where, if you want to have it in the schema markup, the guideline says that it has to be visible and present on the page. And visible is key, right? So it can't just be sort of like hidden in the code. You need to actually make sure that it's visible on the page. So if you're choosing for a business decision not to include that salary, then you don't include it on the page, but then you will expect to see an error or a warning from Google's standpoint because they're not seeing the information that they expected specifically for that page. And again, like that's where errors and warnings like aren't really warnings and errors, right? Like there's nothing wrong with your schema markup. It's more about the fact that you're choosing from a a business side that you don't want to include that. All right. Variable pricing, can that be worked into product? Oh, I just did a whole session on this, like in e-commerce. So we actually, yes is the answer. It's a bit more complex. If you actually search for variable pricing schema markup, Lauren, you can actually find that. Sort of, there's a detailed article that we just recently updated. And then I also did a presentation with Jono from Yoast on the SEMrush webinar in August specifically on that. So if you can't find that, Lauren, reach out to me directly and I will endeavor to point you towards it. But if you find either of those two resources, I talk through them in great detail. All right. Oh, here's a good one for you, Jeff, from Santosh around our beloved structured data testing tool going away. If my application has types which don't fall into the Google rich results, will Schema still optimize my markup to be optimized by SEO? So you're not a rich result. Will Schema app optimize it? So we can optimize anything at Schema
Right.
app. Rich result, like the rich result test tool is very specifically helping you understand what Google rewards you for. And this is sort of like one of the reasons why we're sad the structured data testing tool is going away,
Yeah.
because like it's very limited. Now the good news is that they're going to maintain it. So yay, we'll have a tool that's maintained to do testing. And it does do some advanced schema. So if you have multiple different types of rich results on a page, so a product with an FAQ or a how-to and so forth, it is going to show that. But if you want to sort of see your additional markup, then some of those other tools either sort of are analyzer across the board, or maybe the Rikes testing tool might be a better way of seeing that. Linter is also a great one for that. So check out that Goodbye Structured Data Testing Tool article, Santosh, and you'll find some great resources in there.
And there's absolute SEO benefit to using a schema class that's not eligible for a rich result. If you talk to us at Schema App, we'll tell you that's probably the #1 reason to use structured data across your site is the context and understanding you're affording Google and web crawling technologies. So, it's more difficult now to validate and to look at classes that aren't eligible for the rich results, but they definitely have impact for sure.
All right, have a couple more here, and then we're going to wrap up. We got 6 minutes left, Jeff. Hey, our brain's still going. Good thing we both had those big
All
coffees
right.
this morning. All right, so Keith's just doing shout out. Love your Schema app tool, using the heck out of it. So awesome to hear that. Ryan has one. All right, this is a good thinking one. What is the quickest, biggest win for e-commerce markup in terms of coverage with rich results? Which types of schema are displayed the most often? So product, like I would say,
Hmm.
making sure you have price range, or aggregate rating and availability. That's a super key one. I also like FAQ for product. I don't know, Jeff, what's your opinion there?
Okay. So yeah, totally. Have a product, have an FAQ on your product display page, and which rich results more popular, the product rich result or the review snippet? And that's something that we're looking into. A lot of our customers are e-commerce, and it's interesting. If you have a product with a price and reviews, you're eligible for both that product rich result and the review snippet. And we're not seeing e-commerce fall into either one neatly. Like some are bouncing, some is in one, some's in the other. Um, and it's something that our team's looking into to figure out like which result is ideal, which one is better than the other. So watch out for that.
All right, a couple questions. This one's kind of a fun one around, can we integrate Google My Business ratings for our business using Schema app? So from a Schema app, you can basically include ratings from anything. The question is like, does the rating make sense for a local business, since Google now no longer provides a rich result for that local business site, but instead it has to be from a reputable third party. So this was a change that happened about a year ago. September 19th, I think, was when it happened last year. And so I would say, like, if you're showing ratings on your local business or on your business page, you can use Schema app to optimize those. And I still think that's good. Like, you're still connecting the dots, but make sure you have, like, you're pointing the URL to where that sort of information's housed. However, it will not today, based on the requirements, provide you a rich result for local business. All right, we're getting down to the bottom line here. Can you practice using Schema app about building schema markup without publishing it to your website? Quick answer, Jeff.
Yes.
It's a great way to learn. It produces all the JSON-LD for you. We really are big believers. We all have way more important things to do than write schema code by hand. And especially when you're doing this advanced stuff, you will forget a comma or a parentheses. So let Schema app generate it for you. Oh, this one's so fun. We have 3 minutes left. Okay, Yehuda, thank you for your question. Can you speak a bit about potential applications of a knowledge graph ontology generated from doing schema markup on an entire site? Oh, super fun question. So when you create proper schema markup and you're defining all those connections and sort of, this is something we think about often at Schema App, because we are a graph-based company, a semantic technology company. There's lots of different applications. And I would say, like, we're just starting those conversations with our most innovative customers around how does this make sense within their enterprise? And it's often within an enterprise. So enterprises are often asking, how do we develop an ontology and so forth? And so I really see that schema markup done properly and sort of in a graph technology company, i.e. Schema app, we can accelerate that ontology development by having this sort of marketing data layer. How they then want to use that, there's on-site search capabilities, personalization, like all kinds of conversations going on there. So Yehuda, if you're interested in having a conversation with me on that, feel free to reach out to us and I can share some of the, I'll say, hypotheses that we're working with enterprise on how that looks. All right, last question, wrapping it up, 11:58. If you're a novice, does Schema app guide you? Jeff, do you want to talk about that, about like what we do to help kind of guide people as they start their schema markup journey?
Absolutely. You don't have to write codes. You don't have to know the details of what schema classes are eligible for rich results or what properties you need to make that class eligible. You could have just heard about Schema app or schema markup for the first time right now, and Schema app will help guide you and implement it. Your 30-minute onboarding call, myself or someone from the CSM team will help you get acclimated. There's an in-app guide and a big like base of questions and answers in our knowledge base. So you can totally be a novice and get this done.
Yeah, we're there to help, right? You know,
Right.
Schema App's all about sort of teaching you and making sure that you can do advanced schema markup and get amazing business results. And so, again, if you found this of value, we'd love you to share that with others, tell others about what we do. If you want to have a conversation, we do a really consultative sales process where we really want to get to know you and make sure we develop the right strategy. And again, if you're just getting started and want to start on one site or an agency, we really see you as key partners as we sort of enable you to get this done without IT and with speed, right? Like let's introduce some agility into our customers and especially before the holiday season. If you also have suggestions on what you want to see next, feel free to tweet at Jeff and I, at Martha Van Berkel, or at Jeffrey K. Burns, or at Schema App Tool. Thanks for joining us today and have an awesome day.